Hello,
Hi, good
Laura.
morning.
Thank you so much for being with us today. So, just to do a few quick introductions, my name's Caroline and I'm one of the curators at the Harris. I'm not at the Harris today, I'm working from home because of the COVID restrictions. But today I am interviewing Laura Jeffers, who is a local designer in Preston. She runs a fashion brand here in the city called Asikara. And we are just in the process of acquiring a design by Laura for the Harris collection. So we thought we'd have a chat today and record it to sort of ask our visitors to become involved in this process and to let them know what's happening. Hello, Laura. How are you
Hi.
today?
No, I'm great, thank you. It was a lovely introduction.
So we're really excited to be adding a dress by you to the Harris collection, and you're about to start making it, and we're going to talk in a minute about that process. But I thought we'd start by just asking, when did your interest in fashion start? Did you always know that this was something that you wanted to go into?
I would say yes. As a child, I used to sew with my nan. She used to
Okay.
take little doll clothes and little bits of fabric, help me make teddies. And my love for creativity and sewing began there. And I went on to like high school, did textiles,
Mhm.
and continued that into college, and then also onto uni. I was like, okay, now I can finally start this fashion goal, this fashion dream that I've had for I think it was like 10 years.
So literally since you were a child, that was your main interest, was always fashion, textiles and making.
Making, yeah.
And so you're from Preston, and it
Yeah,
was important, and you studied fashion at Uclan as well, and it has a great course, but I think it was important for you to stay here in the city as well, was it?
it was. I'm a home girl. Like at heart, I really recognized that I was one of the first of the £9,000 fees.
Wow.
And I was thinking about how I'm going to pay all that off for starters.
Mm.
Secondly, moving away to a different place just wasn't appealing to me. Um, I really recognized that my brother stayed home, and he did well. So I was like, you know what? I want to stay here with the support that I have in the place that I call home. And
So that's
just
lovely. So Preston's sort of quite important.
yeah,
Being up in the north and living in Preston's quite important
it's
to you.
very important to me. And I think as well, the course in Uclan was like it's very renowned in the UK. So it's one of the top unis for fashion. So I was like, do I really want to travel all the way to London or just
Yeah.
stay in the north and actually do it here at home? So
So when you started studying fashion at UCLan, did you already know what your sort of like look and approach to fashion was, or did you sort of go there with a more open mind? How were you when you like what? How was the course for you, and how were you when you sort of started out?
so at the very beginning, it was the first start of uni was the first exposure to fashion as a course I'd actually done, because
Mm,
before that it had all been textiles,
right.
more about the fabric and changing the fabric and making something from the fabric you've made. Now it was the fabric's done, how are you going to make that into a garment? And I didn't really have a style or a thought. Like my influences were mainly just things I'd see on TV or in the shops. And I think uni is there to help you develop that style. And there was one tutor in particular in my third year who really helped me to recognize who I was.
Mm.
I feel like, yeah, it was like a 3-4 year journey of just me actually becoming the designer that I am now, or the start of the designer that I am now, pushing me out of the comfort zone I had and showing me, like, Laura, you can do this. You can do more than you think.
How
So, yeah,
wonderful. Everybody needs that sort of encouragement, don't they?
100%, 100%.
Because your brand now, Asikara. Well, tell me a little bit about that name, actually. What does that name mean? Sort of, what's the significance of that name?
Yeah, definitely. So initially my brand was called Laura Jane Fashion, just because my name's Laura, my middle name's Jane, and I do fashion. That was literally the only reason that I chose that
It's
name.
just what it says on the tin.
Yeah, it was just what it says on the tin. But then in 2018, I had a business mentor with the Princess Trust, and she basically said, this name, as lovely as it is, doesn't reflect your brand. So I went on this mad search, like, what am I going to call this brand? Because I didn't even want to change it. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, yeah, the brand should reflect what I do. So the name came from 2 words. So Asika is a word in Shona, a Zimbabwean language, and it basically means created by God.
Mm.
And then Ankara was another part of the word that I kind of merged together. So Ankara is fabric. So in essence, it's kind of created by God with fabric.
Yeah.
And like, I'm a firm believer that humans are created beings, like, and we are beautiful. And I want to celebrate that in what I design and in what I make. And when I kind of remember that the people I'm designing for are like special, especially to God, that means they're special to me. So I want to bring that out in the things that I design and make for other people.
Oh, lovely. So you well, we've got a fabric that you're working with at the minute, and that's actually the fabric just behind you that's going to be the basis of the dress for the Harris, which is this wonderful African print. And your brand Asikara is about using textiles of sort of with a pattern of African heritage, but merging that with sort of like British contemporary design.
Yeah.
So tell us about when you first sort of like figured out what your sort of like your take on fashion, your sort of approach was going to be. How did that, what was the story there?
So in 2012, when I started uni, just the fact that new students come to the area, I met some new students through church. One of them in particular, she was Zimbabwean, and she spoke about how in Zimbabwe they have tailors and how they make garments for you. Just give them a picture and it's like, here you go, make me this. So she kind of adopted me as her tailor, and used to like bring back fabrics and be like, Laura, make me this, Laura, make me this. And as soon as like the first time she brought me back fabric, I was like, wow, like what is this? And that kind of sparked a new kind of design love in my head. And then throughout,
so that was the first time that you'd seen really those African style textiles.
It was the first time I'd seen them not as a garment, I would say.
So tell me a little bit about your heritage, because your family originally, your grandparents are from the Caribbean, is that right?
It is true. People always assume that I'm from like African heritage because of the prints that I use, but I'm actually from Caribbean heritage. I was born here in Preston, and my grandparents actually moved from the Caribbean when I was. And
which islands were they? Which islands were they originally from?
So on my dad's side, my nan is from Montserrat, and on my mum's side, my grandparents are from Dominica.
So that's interesting. So you were brought up in Preston, but the first time you saw this sort of fabric, you immediately were like, I love this.
Yeah.
And you knew that you wanted to work with it.
100%. And I just think throughout uni, I didn't really use them until my final collection, when I met this tutor, and he was like, you know what, do something. Like, I think I spoke to him about the prints that I wanted to use, and he was like, yeah, like, why not do it? And I even like asked African Fashion Week London if they would like sponsor me with some fabrics for the prints and for the garments I designed. Which was a special moment, because it was like I was the only one kind of doing something like that. And I also started to have a voice. Like, this became Laura Jane's stuff. This is what you do. It wasn't just a shirt from New Look, you know. So
you've always known that you wanted to go into fashion, but you went into your course with a very open mind. But it was there through meeting a friend from Zimbabwe and seeing properly for the first time this sort of amazing, colourful, bold patterns where you really knew what you wanted to do. And so you always wanted to have your own fashion, your own label, to have your own company.
Yeah, I've always aspired to have my own brand. I don't know what it is about working for someone else, but it doesn't appeal to me. I just really was like, I have a voice, I'd like to use it. And the only way to do that is by actually creating my own brand.
And staying true to yourself.
So
Asikara, your label, it's a mixture of sort of, you sell ready to wear garments, sort of off the peg garments, but you also do bespoke commissions. And so tell us a little bit about those sort of two sides to your business.
So at the beginning, I was doing all ready-made garments, just because that's kind of what I learned from uni, just making garments. But it got very difficult when I wasn't in uni, because I didn't have the resources to know what's next, what's on trend. So just economically, business-minded head, it was like, why not do garments that people ask for? And also it's so much more special when you make something for somebody that you can design with them and that you can work on with them. It means a lot more to them, especially for things like a wedding. You're making a wedding dress and it's like, this is one of the happiest days of my life. And to be like, this is your dress. No one in the world has it. This is just for you. No one else can have it because it's yours. And I think I love that aspect of having bespoke garments, but also
working with the client really closely. You enjoy that? Yeah.
Working with somebody, like
collaborating.
Yeah.
Because, so let's talk a little bit about the Harris Commission then, as it was right at the beginning of the lockdown. I think there was an article about you in the LEP about your fashion business that a colleague of mine sent to me, and that was the first time I'd sort of heard about you. And then I had a look at your website, and there was actually an African wedding dress on there that I saw that just, I mean, I loved everything on your website, but that garment just really had such an impact. I thought that is such a statement piece. I think if we were going to acquire an example of your work for the Harris, it should be something like that. Have you got that garment there and we can show it to everybody? Yeah. So it's this dress which just has such a wonderful shape. And I got in touch with you and we were sort of having a chat, but we decided not to do an off the peg thing, but to work together on a commission. So would you like to show us a couple of the sketches that you first did and some of the fabrics that we talked about?
Yeah, that's fine. So initially, I think what was nice is that we had like the opportunity to work together on this. So I was talking to you a little bit before about how I'm inspired by people. I love flair, and also architecture is very inspiring to me. So that was kind of the three things that I kind of thought about. I also thought about how this dress needed to have impact. It needed to be something that would look amazing, even if it wasn't worn by someone who could move in it. As it's going to be a piece that's going to be on a mannequin. So
that's true. So with that a bit, so you talked before about how lovely it is to work with the client to design a dress for a wedding day, such a special day. It's going to be worn by a bride. But it's funny, with it being a museum and art gallery, we're asking to collect a dress that's not going to be worn. It seems almost sad, doesn't it? It's not going to be worn by a human. It will go onto a mannequin. So did that became part of your sort of design thinking?
Process. I think instead of me thinking, oh, someone's going to wear this, I need them to be comfortable in it, for them to be flattered in it and look beautiful, it turned to, people are going to see this. So what can I do that would make them want to see this?
Sort of impact, the impact of the dress.
How can I make this dress give off so much power without actually being a moving garment? And I know there were some like challenges along the way, because I had to think about shoulders and mannequin joints and just fitting it correctly.
Well, it's true, because this is going to go on a museum mannequin. Most museum mannequins don't have arms, but we are going to get a mannequin with arms, but they often have quite clunky shoulder joints. So your first design really showcased the shoulders, which is a lovely body part most of the time, except actually in the world of museum mannequins. So you adapted your design slightly, didn't you, with that in mind?
Definitely. So one thing that we did like was the cutouts. And I think from the architecture, there's always like little design features in architecture, like almost like windows. And that's kind of how I bring that into my designs. And also with the structural elements of like the seams. And then just the option of just adding sleeves. So even now, I feel like the design, it could elevate. It might go different from here. A sketch is just a 2D design. So when it becomes 3D, hopefully it's got to be even better.
Because you haven't actually started cutting or making this dress, have you? We're just at the stage of doing these designs, which we're showing everyone now.
Yeah.
Would you mind going back up to the slide that has the two different fabrics on? Because to start with, because of course, as well as designing the sort of shape of the garment, a really important part of your work is the fabric, isn't it?
100%.
So you had a look at some fabric designs that you were interested in, and you sent through a few suggestions, 2 of which are here.
Yeah.
And I was immediately drawn to the red and blue one with these swirling patterns. And it's funny, actually, because at the time that we were talking about this commission, at the minute the Harris is working on a big National Heritage Lottery bid to do a big redisplay of the Harris collections.
Wow.
And we've got a thing called Foucault's pendulum. It's this huge sort of like terrestrial clock that it proves that the Earth is rotating in space. And this huge plum globe at the bottom of a very, very long piece of wire moves as a result of the Earth's rotation, and it sort of traces out this sort of imaginary pattern on the floor. And when I first saw this fabric, it immediately made me think of our Foucault's pendulum. And I had in mind as well that we might display your dress quite close to Foucault's pendulum in the new Harris. So I rather loved, as well as being just a gorgeous fabric, I sort of loved the sort of accidental but happy link between your dress and Foucault's pendulum. What was it about this fabric that you liked?
For me, the impact that it had, as I was scrolling through all these different fabrics on a website, just like, because with COVID, you can't really go anywhere, you can't buy them like physically right now. It was one of those things where it needed to have impact straight away. And this fabric just stood out to me, and I was like, oh, what's that? And I found myself drawn to it more than once. So even though I'd seen other fabrics, I always kind of went back to this one. The colors are very contrasting. So it's like the blue and the red stand out from each other, but also complement each other. And it's really nice what you said about the pendulum, because now I'm looking at it, I can imagine it. I haven't necessarily seen it, but it does almost look like imaginary kind of design that's on
there's
it.
Movement in the pattern, isn't there? And that we want to get sort of movement in your dress, even though it's going to be on a mannequin, but through the sort of ruffles and the sort of like cutouts, and actually this pattern has its own sort of like cutout, with that sort of the red backdrop that you can see through the shapes. There's lots of sort of nice connections building up, isn't there?
Definitely. I'm excited to make it into the garment because like I can see it. So yeah, I'm really excited to start.
So let's go to the final slide, which is sort of where we are in terms of what the dress will look like. So it's still got the cutouts, but it's got this lovely sort of sleeve and the ruffles. And so you think, so where we are at the minute, are you sort of imagining tweaking this design more, or is it sort of where you want it to be?
I think this to me looks right. If anything, I just want the sleeves to possibly have more impact, but I do think that they will anyway. Just because I've drawn it, it doesn't necessarily like showcase every time how it's gonna look. Because the fabric has a mind of its own. It will do its own thing when I put it together. But yeah, I think I'm already proud of what I've designed, so I really can't wait to actually
get going
to life. Yeah.
So Laura, would you mind if you putting us both back on the screen again? Would that be okay? Yeah. So there's the fabric behind you, and you haven't started work on it yet. We're getting the mannequin to you, and you're actually going to sort of, why not just use the mannequin that it's going to go on to sort of design it up. So you're going to start work on that in the next few weeks, and you're going to hopefully do some like filming and some little bits of as you make the garment, which is really exciting for us, because at the Harris, as I said, our sort of collecting interests are garments made, worn or sold in Preston, but we very rarely get we've got the garments dating back in our collection to sort of the 17 and 1800s, the Victorian days, when there were very, very many dressmakers and tailors in Preston, and sometimes we know a little bit about them, but we've never heard them speak or photograph them or anything. So this is a really exciting thing for us to sort of record a designer as the dress in our collection is being made. Is that a funny feeling for you to know that your dress is going into the Harris collection?
It's humbling for me, because the Harris is somewhere that is like a big place in Preston. It's always been there in my life. I've been there a lot of times for a lot of different reasons, and just to think that my work is now going to be part of that collection, like somebody actually wants to collect it and to make it history and to include it in their collection, like to me that's amazing. And I still, like, it doesn't feel real yet because I'm like, I think the day I see it in the Harris, it will be like, it actually happened.
A nice moment. That will be a nice moment. It's interesting that you said humbling, because it's very humbling for us as well, actually, because we've been doing a lot of reflecting this year on what's in our collection. And although we have paintings and textiles and sculptures made by artists of African or Caribbean heritage, we don't that we know have any clothes that are made by a designer of African or Caribbean heritage. So this is a really important garment for us, although also it's a very sort of it's important for the Harris to acknowledge that there's a lot more that we need to do to improve that. So this is a very important garment for us to be acquiring at the moment as well. And it's lovely to be collaborating with you on it. So we're going to get that mannequin to you, and you're going to do some filming of you making it. And hopefully when the dress is close to being finished, then we'll do another little mini Zoom, or perhaps a little film of us putting it on display at the Harris, because although we're imagining this garment on display in the sort of new Harris of the future, we'll have it on display next year, of course. As soon as it's sort of ready, we'll put it straight on display. And I look forward to being with you when you first see it on display at the Harris. I think that's going to be great. But Laura, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just, excited to get started on the project.
Okay, cool, us too. And we'll speak to you again soon, and you take care in the meantime. And thanks very much to everyone who's watched. Thanks again, Laura. I really enjoyed that.